Good morning. It's good to see you all in church again this Sunday. And certainly with all of the news that we hear, we're all following stories of our family, perhaps, friends, and others that we may not know, but we come to understand they're struggling. We don't come to church to hear more of the same. But today I hope that through the gospel lesson that is very applicable to this moment that we find ourselves in, I hope that we can find the bit of inspiration to leave this church renewed. It is said people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. The gospel lesson this morning proves that to us. Because there were two separate processions taking place simultaneously. One, a procession of depression and sadness, a funeral procession led by a mother, a widow who was following her son, her only son, to be buried. And certainly we can visualize the circumstance, the pain, the crying and the tears and the suffering. And then we have another procession coming from the opposite direction to enter the city. A procession of excitement, a procession of hope, a procession bringing miracles to the inhabited world. That procession being led by Jesus Christ. And the two meet. And what does Jesus Christ, the Son of God, do? He goes to this woman and he says, "Do not weep." Now on the surface, if we didn't know what was to come in this story, perhaps we would say, Jesus is a bit insensitive. For those who have lost their homes, for us to come to them and to say, it's going to be all right, it doesn't quite meet the moment. For somebody who doesn't have food, to say God will provide, doesn't do much. And so for Jesus to come to this woman and say, "Do not weep," it's incomprehensible. She is a mother going to bury her son. And Jesus tells her, "Do not weep." But Christ says this not to give her an empty phrase, but to give her hope that He can back. That's very important for us as Christians. Because the hope that we feel, we talk about Christian hope, it is hope that is backed by the power of Jesus Christ. To have hope that can't bring anything in reality is useless. But when Jesus Christ says to the woman, "Do not weep," it is because He is going to help her in a real way. It's because He's going to take away the woman's pain and suffering. And Jesus does something that's very profound. With all three of the people that He raises from the dead, the young man is one of the three in today's gospel. He does not call up to his father. He does not perform a liturgical ceremony. No. He calls upon the person, "Arise." And He speaks to that person, restoring life in this young man. And it's supernatural. Because the gospel says the young man got up and he spoke and he went about his life. But the hope and the power that was transferred from God to the suffering mother and to the dead young man cannot be explained with words or with emotions that we come to feel in this life. So how does all of this tie into our present moment? Many of you sitting here in this congregation are suffering on a personal level. If you are not, you certainly know a friend or an acquaintance who is going through a difficult time. And at the very least, all of us are aware that from Barefoot Beach to Pelican Bay to Fort Myers to Sanibel, there is devastation beyond count and without reckoning. And we say, God help us. And we say, God give these people strength. But we forget that if we are to give the hope of God, we have to also be the hand of God doing His work in this world. What I said to the kids earlier, I really meant. And I hope we try to internalize that, because all of you in the congregation now are the example to those youngsters of what they should be doing at this moment. You all are the voice of God that they will hear in their minds as they go off to college, and they are going to try to be pulled away from the church, pulled away from God, pulled away from trying to receive this eternal hope and this message that sustains us like the bread of life. And so today, my friends, we are all invited to a luncheon next door. And the church doesn't have reserved seats, and the church is not asking you for a ticket cost. But this luncheon is for us to raise funds for those who are without a home, those who are without food and water. And we're doing it, yes, to serve God. We're doing it, yes, to help those that are in need. But we are also doing it to set an example and teach these kids what they should be doing in a time of crisis. Because it's all too easy for us to try to get back to life as normal and smile and go on with our day-to-day routines. But that offers zero to those who are without a home. It offers nothing to those feeling helpless and suffering. It is said that if you preach to the suffering, you will never have an empty congregation. Think about that. Every single one of us in our lives has or is or will experience real helpless pain. And we can come to church and we receive the gospel message, but it has to do more in our lives than that. I was asked during my first month of ordination, somebody was trying to be a little quick with me. And the lady said, "Father, should I leave church after the sermon knowing what the gospel says?" And I, perhaps being a little quick myself, said, "No, you should leave church feeling what the gospel says." And that's what we all need in this moment. And that's what we need to give to our children. That they not hear us talk about loving people and having hope and doing good. That they see us in action. And I'm proud of so many of you in this community that have come to meet the moment. From Philoptochos to Agape Charities, to all of you stopping by the church to bring food and water and donations and kindness, and I know you're doing that in your own circumstances. But it's not done. We all know we have to keep being focused and compassionate and empathetic to the suffering. And as I said last week, most especially because the suffering is not on the other side of the globe. The suffering is in our backyard. How much more should we be responding as the community, as the family of Saint Catherine? And I also want to say in closing that I'm really touched and moved by watching the community come together with such strength and power to respond in this crisis. And I hope and pray that we continue this, doing the good works of God and being that example to our youth that we need to be. Amen.